My name is Jack Manning. I'm originally from Dalton, Massachusetts. I've lived in Vermont most of my adult life. I'm an engineer by training and had a long career in aerospace, but I've always liked motorcycles. So
My name is Sherb Lang, and I'm from Vermont, USA, and I work at the Classic Bike Experience in Essex, Vermont. Well, when I was a kid, my dad, he bought a small Ducati moped. We lived in Spain, and um, so he got that for me and my two older brothers. And then he got a Puch or Push or 50cc that for us.
my first bike was a 1973 Triumph. I still have it. My first date with my late wife was on that bike, and now I have Commando, a Trident, and I still have the original Triumph 750. Oh, always loved them, right? So my mom would have told you that when I was a little kid, I couldn't even pronounce motorcycle. I said Ungus Uncle. And when I came of age in the 70s, the British bikes were what I loved, and the Nortons were the ones that I always lusted after. But I could only afford a Honda, 450 Honda, and I ultimately got a Triumph, and then finally was able to get a Commando, an 850 Commando, and that's the bike I still have today.
And then I believe it was 1970, actually, yes, it was September 24th, 1976. He and my mom drove up to Andorra, and he came back with a 1974 Norton Commando, and it was cherry red, beautiful, all shiny. I remember the day he brought it home. I was 6 years old, and it was the day that I realized that my dad was really cool. And just I can remember that day, and everybody had come over and looked at it, and then the adults went inside, and of course my older brother, looked down at me and he's like, "Dare you to touch it?" Off I go, touched it, right on the exhaust, burnt my thumb. So my dad comes running outside, and that's the memory. I don't remember much after that, but I remember that entire episode, and that's what got me hooked on bikes, and on Nortons specifically, and just I can still picture the exhaust nut and the fin nut and the fins on the bike itself. It's classic, and that to me is a motorcycle. So when we moved back to the States in '81, he rode it a little bit, but it got put in a garage, and unfortunately, became a barn find after 33 years. And in his early 70s, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I can remember he came to me one day and he said, I would love to go for one last ride on that bike. And just about broke my heart. And, because he had always intended to rebuild that bike, always said he wanted to do that, and just ran out of time. And by that time, he had given me the bike. He had given it to my oldest brother, who wasn't able to repair it. And so I did. And it took me a while, and I found the Classic Bike Experience. I had never worked on motorcycles before. Worked on my own vehicle with my dad and stuff like that, but never a motorcycle. And it took longer than I wanted, but I got it restored, got it repainted back, kept it as stock as I could. And in July 2023, I was able to take him for that last ride. I've got a video of it, and when he was in a nursing home by that time, and when I went, a nurse brought him out to the visitor center, or just outside the nursing home, and I went to get the bike, and she told me afterwards, as I was driving up to pick him up, he looked up at her and he was like, I used to have a bike that looks just like that. And he, there were times when I would walk in and he knew who I was, but he didn't know from where. And I would be like, hey, Dad, I was working on the bike. And his face just lit up. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, what's next? He couldn't remember what he had for breakfast. He couldn't remember, barely remembered me sometimes, but he remembered that bike. And it was just such a large part of who he was in the late 70s and early 80s, and he and my mom. And just that's how I got into motorbikes, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I want, yeah.
One thing led to another with the shop, where we started as a club in my garage, and after my late wife passed, and it was a hobby, and I'd finally gotten my Commando, and we had a lot of friends over, and we did this and that, and then we bought out a business in New Hampshire, a guy by the name of Frank Holmes, who had Brit Bike Barn, and we started doing some repairs and all, and then we got on. We did a restoration for a fellow down in Connecticut, and it was a project for a Commando, and the video his son took was called the Norton Project, and that thing went viral. And so in 2 years, everybody thought we were, the Norton experts, when in fact we'd only done a few of them. And then Discovery Channel called us and said, hey, we saw the video. We'd like you to be on TV, on our Cafe Racer TV program. So we did 2 more Commandos. And so we just got more and more recognition as being a Norton shop. And like most people in the business, we were essentially self-taught. We're all engineers and technical people, so we had that going for us. But as time has gone on, I would say 70% of our business is our Commandos now. And the rest of our are pretty much Triumphs and BSAs. Well, we just celebrated, let's see, we started in my garage in 2005, and we became a business in 2008. We were interviewed at that time, and the newspaper reporter said, tell me again why you want to open up a motorcycle shop in the middle of winter in Vermont after the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And our answer was, well, because we can. I was still working, and I had a business associate who was one of the engineers I knew at General Dynamics, who was retired. And so he kind of ran the place. I was on travel all the time, and it's always had this sort of clubby guild feeling to it. But we would let people work on their bikes here. And what it amounted to was you'd have customers come far and away to work on what was then a lot of Cafe Racer bikes people wanted to build. And so we always had this sort of guild. And if you look behind me, you'll see the high bay here, where we've got a bunch of bikes that are being worked on by our members. And so they pay modest fees to be able to be here. And then Sherb runs the front of the shop, the commercial side of the business, so somebody could drop off a bike and we can repair it and work on it and all. So it's evolved over time. People refer to this shop as a community, and I would say that's a pretty accurate representation. We're pretty adamant about a couple of things. One is if you're going to work here, you have to be safe. We also don't allow any discussion of politics, which is more poignant these days. But it's a safe space, and we have a very diverse group. It's, a lot of people bemoan the fact that a lot of the industry has basically older people and they're aging out. We have kids, we have fathers and sons, we have women, we have gay couples, we have anybody who's interested in a bike. And the point is, if you want to come and learn, we'll show you, and we'll show you what we know, and what we don't know, we'll call people like Ashley and Carl and get some help. But I would say that's really what's kind of kept the thing going for a long time and attracts our clientele.
We'll do repairs if somebody has a classic British bike, Norton, Triumph, BSAs, but about 80% of our work is with Nortons. We'll do a repair, we'll do an oil change, we'll do anything from maintenance work to, hey, my dad used to own this bike. It got put away in 1978, and he passed a few years ago, and I want to get, I remember riding on it when I was 2 years old, and I'd like to get it back. And we can do that and get it back to its stock configuration. That's what we prefer to do. I'm kind of a purist. I'm not. I won't put. It's not that I won't put a lock nut where a regular nut should be. But I like them in their original condition. That's how they were made. That's how the designers envisioned it, and that's how I prefer to have them. And we'll do it all from A to Z. Yeah.
A little of both. So historically, we've had people who have finally got around to, gee, it was my dad's bike. I'm going to restore his dad's bike. That's what got him in here. We've had father-son teams. We've had, it's always been this sort of experiential kind of engagement. But there was always a bike at the center of the story. And as Stephen likes to say, everything is a story around here. But what we found is we've had younger people getting involved who would come in maybe on an old Honda. They want to learn how to fix it. We're not really an expert Honda shop, but we'll help them. They can rent guild space if they want. And then they start looking around and they see these bikes and they're like, oh my God, I have to get one. And so they just, it's like, if you want a Jaguar, you should own a Miata too, right? So you have something that runs and something that you work on. But they're universally appealing. And I think what we're finding is with a younger generation, we're trying to make it more affordable. For example, if you have guild people who are retired and have discretionary income, that's great. But if we've got this young kid, Matt, who's about 30, he's waiting for his first child, he's riding around in a single cylinder Japo, what's it? And he just wants to hang around. And so we're trying to accommodate him and say, look, why don't you just come and be a helper and we'll find a different revenue stream for your contribution rather than the normal guild dues. And it'll be your one night a week. Wednesday night is our wrench night when you can come and just be part of the gang. So there's always a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of compassion. And I think because the machines are timeless, it's the look, the sound, the feel. And the only bike I can tell people that, if you haven't had a British bike before and you really want one and they say, what should I get? I said, the only one that I can guarantee will be at least as good as you'd hope it would be as a Commando. And but so far that's played out to be true.
We also have people who are at an age where they've been successful and they had always wanted to get one when they were younger, but they had a family, they had, this, that, and the other. And now they're like, I've always wanted one and I'm going to get it. And so they'll either buy a new one and they want us to go through it, or they'll buy a barn find and say, please rebuild it. And, everywhere in between. And yeah, oftentimes we'll have people who were like, I used to have a Norton. I wish I'd never sold it. I bought this one to relive the glory days, as it were. And yeah, so we will have I don't want to say older clientele because I feel like I'm in that boat. But there are quite a few people my age and in their 50s, 60s. We do have some people in their late 80s who are still riding. They just want us to install an Alton for them because they can't kick it anymore. Whatever needs to get done for on those bikes, we can do. We have a motorcycle or an engine repair service. So we've had people ship us their engines, whether it's in one box or 5, we've had that. And we'll go through it. We'll look at what's wrong. We'll reuse everything that we possibly can. And we'll test the bike. We've got a test stand for the motors. So we've got an old frame. We will install it onto that frame, connect carbs, slave carbs. We've got slave tank, slave ignition. We'll run it through like about 10 heat cycles and make sure that everything's running correctly. And then we'll drain the oil out of it and pack it up and ship it back to them. If they're not comfortable taking the engine out and reinstalling it, they'll ship us the bike. And, we've had that happen from California. we're in the Northeast Kingdom, you know, New England, and from California, Nevada, um, Washington, and everywhere in between. More of the same. Just so if you've watched, you know, I'm very passionate about what we're doing. You know, it's why, you know, I found this later on in life, and I all I want to do is, you know, Jack has a saying, he's happy counting his tens of dollars at the end of the week, and that's fine with me. I love working on the bikes, and I love seeing them get back on the road. It, you know, I see bikes that are just leaning up against a fence, and you know, or sitting under a tree or in a barn, and they have a soul. You know, certain bikes, and they're not disposable. These, you know, these classic bikes, they're not disposable. They weren't meant to be. And you know, they're just sitting waiting for the right person, and that's what I'm hoping will happen, is that more people will see those bikes and say, hey, let's get this you know, let's get this back on the road. And you can feel it. Some bikes just have that soul in there and just waiting to get back on the road. Yes, I'm hoping so. And you know what I would, so we have what's called a guild. And so if you're in the local community, you know, within Vermont, northern New York, northern New Hampshire, um, you can rent a gurney. And so instead of having us do all of the work, you rent the gurney from us, and we'll help you along. Every Wednesday night we have what's called wrench night. People will come in and they'll wrench on their own bike. And Jack and I usually, you know, we're there and we will help with whatever you need. If nobody needs help, we'll work on our own bikes. But that doesn't happen very often. And they have access to all of our tools. We'll order the right parts. We'll make sure that they're using, you know, Andover Norton parts, because they're the ones that we've partnered with, because they've got the blueprints. They're made to factory specs. As I've said before, I'm a purist. I want to use the original parts if possible. And yeah, we'll get those bikes back on the road. And so what we're seeing happen is some of the older people who have younger kids, you know, in their teens and stuff, they're coming in and they're bringing their kids in. And, you know, I'm talking to you, Mark and Colin, you know, they're coming in, and that's the next generation. And I mean, I remember working on an old Model T with my dad when I was in my teens. That stuck with me. And those are memories that I'll never forget, working with my dad on those bikes. As a, you know, it was that transition of boy to man. You know, he was able to give me more responsibility on the rebuild. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do as we move forward. And just, you know, the cooperation and partnership with Andover is helping us with that, because they're making sure that we can get the right parts, and that when we get the parts, they're going to fit. And, you know, having had aftermarket parts from elsewhere, not bad mouthing, but we haven't always had them fit. And sometimes when you're trying to work with the younger kids, it gets disappointing. And, you know, you can see that frustration. And, you know, I hide mine well when I'm doing it because I get frustrated as well. But the hope is that we can get these, you know, get these kids. And in 20, 30 years, hopefully they haven't let the bike sit in their barn in the interim. But if they do, they can bring their kids, and they can do the same thing and have that same experience with their kids, and just pass it on to generation. And, you know, I hope in 150, 200 years, these Nortons and you know, Triumphs and BSAs, I hope they're still on the road. And, you know, just it's such a big difference when you hear of, you know, we do have some other brand bikes, some people like the CB or the CB 350s, the Hondas, the Kawasaki's, Suzuki's sometimes, and they can't find the parts from that generation. And it's really difficult for them. And for us to be able to say, if you need a part for this bike, we can get it. We have a lot of people call us up, hey, I've got this old bike, it hasn't run, I'm going to try to get it back on the road. Do you know if parts are still available? Why, yes, they are. We can, what do you need? Such a big difference. It makes the job so much easier.
Well, the partner I started this with, who fortunately passed just before COVID, we have a thing on the wall that says our business strategy is to not screw it up. Okay. Because the place has a fair amount of magic to it. So we're careful in the moves we make. I would say a big portion of this is succession planning. Okay. I'm just turning 70. Sherb's a young guy, relatively speaking, and he spent 2 years, working in the shop here and kind of learning all the nuts and bolts, but he's a whiz when it comes to computer systems and I'll call it production control. And then we have some other people who are helping out, Steve and others, who just do what they can to kind of keep the place going. Vision wise, I think we're a bit opportunistic. So when we saw that the New England Norton Owners Association was going to be hosting the Nino rally or the INOA rally last year, we've been active with that. And so we were, 2 hours away, we're going to do it. We offered to do all the tech sessions or at least coordinate them. And next thing you know, these two guys from Andover are coming, and we said, well, we'll be happy to host you guys. And so Carl and Ash had a pretty good time. We gave them a couple of bikes to ride and found some cider for them to drink. And so this has turned into a nice relationship for us as we're trying to hone our Norton skills. And I think the concept of being a factory shop for factory authorized shop for Andover, it's a privilege for us, and we want to live up to that. We have other opportunities with some of the other area shops here that we coordinate with. For example, the modern Triumph shop. They carry Triumphs, Ducatis. They can now carry Indians. We have a very good relationship with them, and so we kind of commingle. And we're thinking of putting a couple of bikes down at their shop just to get the word out that yes, if you want to get into these bikes, there is a resource that makes it available for you. I think longer term, having the workshop establishes credibility for us. It does for Andover as well, right? If you're fixing these things day in and day out, you've got some credibility. And they will humble you. I mean, I don't care how long you've been doing it. You can pull your hair out on any given day trying to figure things out. But at the end of the day, you're looking for revenue streams, if I can put it in that term, that are relatively low risk, but rely on your expertise. So one of the things we're thinking about is, can you do a service offering like a virtual workbench, where people could Zoom in or FaceTime in, and you pay for the service of, hey, I want to get my bike started. What's the right way to do it? It's been sitting around for 20 years. We would take you through all the steps. And, the technology these days, we've done it a lot. We sell Alton starters, and we oftentimes have people Zoom in after they've bought it and say, okay, let me look over your shoulder. Yep, that shaft looks good. No, I'd polish that up, or let me get you a couple extra parts. And so I think that kind of remote support is another avenue that we can do. And I think one of the things for our relationship with Andover is that being here in the States, I mean, the country's big, right? But it's only 3 time zones, yet, Europe is 6 time zones away. So if you're in California, you're 9 time zones away. So the idea of being able to provide tech support, answer questions, we do it for the Alton guys all the time. You guys at least speak English, Paul and company at Alton. Their French is good, but not great. But we just answer all the questions that anybody has in the States, whether they've bought the starters from us or not. So I think that kind of service and expertise is something we'd like to build on. I know Sherb and Steve and you guys are very good at a lot of the media, a lot of the YouTube videos. Every Monday morning, we get our coffee and watch Ash talk about whatever he's going to talk about. And so we want to do some of that as well, more maybe on the technical side. So anyway, that's kind of loosey-goosey the way we're going commercially. Longer term, this summer, Sherb is going to be taking over more and more of the day-to-day operation. He already is of managing the shop itself, and I want to step back and spend more time on the guild. And what I really want to do here is we have some wonderful apprentices we've had come through the shop, probably 5 or 6 in the past couple of years. Very, very neat, in this case, all young men. But they've all gone off, and when they're here, we don't just have them clean parts. We say, look, you're going to have to learn a little bit about dealing with customers. You're going to have to deal a little bit with, how you're going to manage the budget of this thing, how we're going to estimate it. And so we try to give them a more holistic experience. There's a tech center that's not too far from here that we're tied up with. And so to me, that's another way to kind of imbibe the next generation of bike owners. And whether it's all going to be British and it's all going to be Commandos, that would be great, but it doesn't have to be. So if we think about how this thing might morph, it really boils down to how do you want to set it up so that you can attract the same kind of personality, the same kind of enthusiasm, and respect everybody has for each other, and take this thing forward. So 2 things, there's the commercial side of the business, and then there's the guild side of the business. And with Sherb having come on board and being able to take care of so much of the operations, it's given me a chance to step back and say, okay, what do I really want to do on the guild side? We have a lot of well-to-do members who, some are here, some are not, that I'd like to be able to hit them up for a fund, a scholarship fund, so that we can have a continuing number of kids coming through here. So that's one of the things I want to do. And I think as far as our space is concerned, a little side note was we thought we were going to lose this space a few years ago when the building was sold, but we've ended up with a great landlord, more than happy to help us keep going. And so we're going to be here for a while.